Hi, I'm Aarik Danielsen, the Trib's Arts and Entertainment Editor. I'm here with James Owen, our film critic, just to talk a little bit about summer movie season. Summer is actually closer than you might think, and especially the summer movie season. James has a piece out in this week's Tribune that talks about how the summer movie season really doesn't ever end anymore. It really kind of like, I don't know, made me think about like how school, like I feel like every year school starts earlier and ends later, and it feels like the summer movie season's the same thing. So definitely read that piece, but we wanted to talk about a few other things about what's coming up. And so I guess just to start off with kind of a general question, as you look at kind of the slate of summer movies that are on approach, what are your general feelings? Are you excited about this year's crop? Underwhelmed? I mean, just give me a sense of like what you're thinking as you look at it.
Well, I suppose if you're inclined to say that you like comic book movies and sequels, I mean, if you're looking at, you know, you've already got Avengers out, which I really liked. You've got Deadpool 2 coming out in a couple weeks. You've got Ant-Man versus Wasp coming out in July. So there's already 3 comic book movies you've got. Then you've also got the Jurassic World sequel, and you've got Mission Impossible 6. So if you're willing to tolerate these kind of franchise pieces, I mean, there's a lot of exciting looking things coming out, but some people might say that lacks some originality, which I think people have been kind of saying for the past 40 some odd years. When they were saying like, oh, I can't believe Jaws is based on this book, and that was 1975.
Right.
So, so I think that that's a complaint that you're going to hear a lot, and you're going to hear it more because it is to the point now, I make this point in the article, that movies are costing $250 to $300 million, and a lot of people just can't hardly believe that, but when you look at all the special effects, you look at all the actors in a piece, you look at the fact that that doesn't even include advertising in places like China, Europe. Those are pricey, and so they need to go with safe bets.
Sure, right.
So if you like that stuff and you can tolerate big franchise movies, I think it has a lot of exciting things to offer.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you want to see as the summer comes up. So let's say, you know, which I'm not gonna do, don't get excited, but I'm gonna give you $50 to spend on summer movies, which might be, forget like concessions and stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say that'll give me one movie.
Let's say maybe 3 or 4 movies, something like that. Maybe you get a matinee or 2.
Sure.
You know, if there's a handful of films that you could only see this handful of films this summer, what are some of the things that would be at the top of your list?
Well, you know, like being a child of the 70s and 80s, I'm always a big Star Wars guy, so the fact that you've got the solo standalone film coming out in Memorial Day, I think that is exciting just because the trailer looks really good. I think the cast of it looks very appealing. The backstory of it, you know, they fired the directors, they brought Ron Howard in. Ron Howard's not exactly the most dynamic, you know, innovative director, but he's a solid, sturdy, you know, hit maker. Sure. And I think that looks pretty cool. Yeah. I think that looks really good. I think, you know, if you're going to like look at some of the smaller films, which is kind of what I think people always kind of overlook because there's so much attention put to these larger films, you look at Under the Silver Lake with Andrew Garfield, which is David Wallace, who did It Follows, which is a great modern horror film that if you have not seen that, you need to go see it. Or stream it because it is really well done and it's very scary and it's not overly graphic or anything like that. But also, you know, and I'm not a huge Spike Lee guy because I think he's a little, I think his process is a little, I think he's not very subtle.
Yeah, sure.
But he's got this movie coming out called Black Klansman, which is about this this cop who goes undercover. He's a black cop who goes undercover to the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, which is a real story, right?
It's based on a true story, which I mean, a lot of people couldn't believe it was true.
Sure.
But Denzel Washington's son, who's in the TV show on HBO called Ballers, he's in it. Adam Driver's in it. Topher Grace plays David Duke. So if you're familiar with, like prominent people in the Klan community, David Duke is kind of a name that people will know. Sure. And so Spike Lee teamed up with Jordan Peele, who's produced this. Jordan Peele did Get Out last year, won an Oscar for its screenplay, so I think that could be pretty exciting.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Topher Grace is David Duke. I'm going to need a few weeks to just wrap up.
I think it's pre-facial surgery.
Okay. I'm just picturing Eric Foreman, and it's hard to say.
I think that you know, Spike Lee did an interview with the Hollywood Reporter, and he said that he kind of try to choose somebody that might come off as likable.
Sure, that makes sense.
To make it a little more
A
challenging.
little harder for us, yeah.
Yeah,
To hate him immediately.
Yeah, and so that's where I think Topher Grace is kind of an interesting pick.
That makes sense. That makes sense, yeah. What's something that's coming out that you think a lot of people are going to see, a lot of hype about, that maybe you're a little worried about, something you think may not live up to the billing?
Yeah, there's a sequel coming out this year to a movie I didn't really like, and everyone loves it. It's The Incredibles.
Okay.
I found it to be a very deductive, kind of mean-spirited movie, frankly. That movie came out 14 years ago.
Okay, that's right. Wow.
And everyone just kind of raves about it. I really didn't like it very much, and so now there's a lot of build-up about the sequel.
Sure.
And I hope it's better.
Yeah.
You've seen some, and actually the example I think of is I absolutely hated the first Shrek, but then when I saw the second Shrek and had that Antonio Banderas playing the kind of the Puss in Boots, that was really funny to me, and so like I can always say like I like Shrek 2 a lot better than the first Shrek, and maybe The Incredibles 2 will be better than the first one, but then everyone seems to think, oh, that was really good, so maybe it's me.
Might not be The Incredibles, it might be, but I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting to see
I just
how that one
didn't.
turns out.
I mean, but like and it is another one of these movies where you've waited a very, very long time.
Sure, it can't live up to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I still am trying to figure out exactly what the process on that is because because really, is it a reboot? Is it a remake?
Yeah.
Are you calling it a sequel because there's kids who were younger when The Incredibles came out that are going to be in their 20s now that will see it as some sort of blast of nostalgia? I mean, all that's very possible. But at the same time, were we really, I think a lot of people would say they forgot about the first movie.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they didn't, but I just don't think it's like really, when you think about Frozen, you think about all these other like Pixar movies that have come out since then, it seems like it's been a while.
Sure, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I feel like even people still talk about older Pixar movies before they talk about that one. So
but and they talk about Finding Nemo, and there was several years between it and Finding Dory, which I think came out last year. It came out last year or the year before, and it had come out in 2003. So, though the people at Pixar are probably not, they probably have a good sense of what is going to work.
Sure.
As opposed to me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they have a pretty good job.
Yeah, they're good at that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, okay, so thinking about, we've talked about films that are coming out big and small. Are there any, depending on how you feel, kind of regardless, I guess was what I'm trying to say, of how you feel about the film, any performances that you're really looking forward to, maybe one or two folks that you're like, man, I really can't wait to see what they do with this role?
I was talking about Ant-Man versus Wasp, and Ant-Man was kind of one of these movies that was a little more smaller scale, a little funnier, a little lighter, as opposed to a lot of comic book movies. What has been what has been a real thrill for me lately is to see like Michelle Pfeiffer kind of come back into mainstream films.
Yeah.
She plays Michael Douglas's wife in this, who was, I think, perceived as deceased in the first Ant-Man, and so I think anytime you can see Michelle Pfeiffer come back in something, that is always really exciting for me, because I think she's just one of these actresses that was really dynamic back, a couple, 20 years ago or so, and so just finally see her in stuff now is pretty cool.
Cool, yeah.
And I just really, I think that's got a lot of promise to it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I didn't realize she was in that. That's
great. Well, it was going to be Sharon Stone.
Okay. And
she was going to team up with Michael Douglas.
Oh,
but apparently Sharon Stone is hard to work with, so allegedly. Sharon, if you're watching,
So Michelle Pfeiffer, I think that's a good choice. I think that's a good, a good consolation prize if you have that one. So very cool. Okay.
And I love Paul Rudd in that. Paul Rudd's like a really fun actor, and like he's an unlikely comic book hero.
Sure.
And so to see him in that stuff is kind of fun, because he's like Midwestern guy, and he's always been kind of like goofy in some of this stuff, and so it's just kind of fun to see him in like a really like big kick butt kind of action movie.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, very very true. Well, summer's upon us. Check out James's piece in this week's Tribune for commentary on several of the films he's mentioned, but others that we didn't get to. Check that out. You might even see James at the movies this summer. So thanks a lot.
If you're lucky.